Believe it or not, we're in a sermon series about the questions that God asks. And the first question was, where are you? It was when Adam and Eve were hiding in the garden because they realized they were naked. They want God to see them naked. As a little child, I would imagine that God would have x-ray vision anyway, so it wouldn't matter. But they were hiding from God because they knew what they'd done. The second question was, who is your brother? Where is your brother? Wait a second, not who, where? You know, Adam and Eve had 2 children, right? Cain and Abel. Where's your brother? The third question comes a lot later in the book of Genesis. Genesis 32, verses 26 through 28. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." So that's the passage, but I'm sure maybe some of you need a little bit of backstory on that. So Jacob is the brother of Esau, son of Isaac and Rebekah, tribes of Israel. And at this point in the story, he's all those things. He's married to his 2 wives and 2 handmaidens. So he has these 4 wives, and they're the mothers of all the 12 tribes of Israel. And the kids have been born, and he stays behind as they're nomadically traveling to a new place by the Jabbok River and has this encounter where he wrestles with an angel or a man. We think God, because obviously this is a question, all night long. There's wrestling going on all night long. And Jacob is like overcome. He's like the winner of this wrestling match. And Jacob says, "I won't let you go until you bless me." So this defeated angel, individual, representative of God, doesn't bless him, but asks him a question. What is your name? Jacob's name literally meant heel grabber. That was his name. If you remember, when he and his twin brother Esau were born, Esau was born first, but Jacob was born with his hand around Esau's heel, as if the infant child was trying to usurp his older brother in order to be the firstborn. Now, why do we say that? That's like kind of far-fetched. Not really, because you learn later on in the story that Jacob not only tricks Esau out of his inheritance, but he also fools his own father, Isaac, into thinking that he's Esau and steals the blessing. So the birthright and the blessing, Jacob gets both of those. He had intended to do it at birth, grabbing Esau's heel, but he ended up doing it later, very craftily hatching a plan with his mother, Rebekah, that was her favorite child of the 2 twin boys. So Jacob's name literally means heel grabber. And the reason why, by the way, his family is nomadic right now is because he has been living on his father-in-law's property, because he married the 2 daughters of Laban, their sisters, and then the handmaidens came with him. He's been living on this property, and he tricks his father-in-law and escapes and leaves. So he's running away from an angry Laban, an angry father-in-law, and he's going across the Jabbok. But the whole reason he got to this land where he met Laban's daughter was because he was fleeing his brother's wrath after he stole the birthright. Talk about a rock in a hard place, because Jacob's having to go back over, and who's there? Esau, with 400 men. He doesn't know quite what to do. So instead of risking his own self, he sends his family and his entourage and all the things that he took from his father-in-law. He sends them all ahead. Because certainly Esau's not mad at them. He's mad at Jacob. He came into the world grasping. And his name, Jacob, every time somebody says the name Jacob, it is a reminder that he is a trickster, that he is dishonest, that he is always grasping. He rarely used his own name. He rarely identified himself as Jacob. He lied to his father, said he was Esau, and even when he met Rebekah at the well, that betrothal scene, he doesn't identify who he is by his first name. Jacob's name might have been a constant embarrassment to him, a reminder that he is second-born, heel grabber. A heel grabber has to be somebody low to the ground, because that's where the heels are. And so he goes throughout life with this name, with possibly, I don't know, I'm just putting this on the text, it's not in there, an inferiority complex, maybe. And in this passage where he's fleeing Laban, and it's as if he's a con man that has just escaped his last con, and now he's hiding out. Behind him is his angry father-in-law. In front of him is his brother Esau. And he is between a rock and a hard place. And all he wants to do is sleep. But God has other plans. Some scholars call this passage Jacob's conversion. That conversion went something like this. Let me go, for it is daybreak. Jacob says, no, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And in response to that, the man he was wrestling says, what is your name? Who are you? What have you done? Reveal yourself to me. You want a blessing? You got to tell me who you are. And after Jacob admitted who he was changed. He said, Jacob. And the man said, you will no longer be Jacob, but you will be Israel. And that's your biggest clue. It's God that Jacob was wrestling with all night long, because Jacob changes. In the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a fifth step. You know, there's 12 steps. The fifth step is a practice of admitting one's defeat to another person. And of course, it's a very ancient practice, but it's been validated every century, and it characterizes the lives of spiritually centered and truly religious people. But it's not limited to religion, because psychiatrists and psychologists point out the deep need for every human being to unburden themselves of where they've been, of what they've done, of who they are up to this point. It has practical insights and knowledge to point out our own personality flaws and discuss them with an understanding and trustworthy person. You see, Jacob reaches the end of this long night, and it's almost daybreak. He's been wrestling all night long. And you don't know this, but what if the angel has been asking him all along, who are you? Tell me who you are. And Jacob doesn't want to tell him, doesn't want to tell him, doesn't want to tell him. Jacob is so strong in his refusal to admit who he is that they wrestle until daybreak, until finally he says, I'm Jacob. He says, I'm Jacob. I am he. And I did this, and this, and this, and this. You see, God cannot transform us if we do not willingly reveal ourselves. Jacob told the angel his name. And this is what Trevor Hudson says in the book questions God asks. Like Jacob, we want to know God's name. Often this indicates that we want to tame God, whom we can manage for our own ends. We do not want God to be too surprising or unpredictable or wild, nor do we want to go into too many details about the mess of our own lives. But that's just not the way God works. And when psychiatrists and psychologists say it's our human nature to unburden ourselves of these things, you got to go back to the creation and the whole idea that this isn't just a biblical thing, this is a biological thing. This is how we're created to be. Jacob wrestles with the angel. He's trying to fight it all night long, and finally he tells him, I'm Jacob. I'm the grasping one. Maybe that's why he was so good at wrestling. But in his book, Hudson talks about how being honest about who we really are can help us more than anything else. God can't transform us unless we willingly reveal ourselves. And then, after that, what happens to Jacob? He gets a blessing. His name is changed. His name is still called to this day. He is Israel. He is the nation of people. He was indeed blessed. And guess what? According to Genesis, we don't know that he did any more of his former trickster, dishonest behavior again. By that point, he was done. A con man having escaped his last con. So he gets the blessing because he revealed who he was. And we ask for God's name. We ask for God. We want to know God's name. We want to know who God is, what God can do for us. But maybe it's more important that we tell God our name. That we let God know who we are. That we unburden ourselves and unearth the things we may not like to think about. God gives us a new name, a new identification, and makes us truly his. And with our new name, we are God's beloved. That identifies us for the rest of our lives. It identifies our divine calling to be a part of God's family and carry that name. The song that Mary sung, that Lauren Daigle made famous, brings this point home. It doesn't have to be this way. You can live life a different way. You don't have to carry around the stories that you're telling yourself about who you are. You can understand what God says about you. You don't have to carry around an unworthy name of deceit. You can choose to let God give you a new name and a new identity. And ultimately, God is where we need to find our identity. But I dare say we wrestle. We wrestle, we wrestle, we wrestle. One day, may not be by the River Jadwick, may happen in Palm Beach County, our wrestling will end, and we will give up to God what we've done, who we've been. And God will gently take our hand and bless us and give us a new name. God is where we find our identity.